So what if that sudden terrifying silence you get from a guy after a string of absolutely perfect dates doesn't actually mean he's losing interest?
Right. What if it's like biological proof that he's actually falling for you?
Exactly. Because I mean, you know that exact feeling, right? You're staring at your phone and the silence coming from the other end just feels, well, it feels physically heavy.
Oh, absolutely. It's not just a lack of messages. It's this loud, anxiety-inducing quiet.
Yeah, and it somehow always follows the most magical, vulnerable weekend you've spent together. You were just starting to exhale, thinking, wow, this is actually going somewhere, and then
Yeah.
just an echoing void.
It is a universally understood form of emotional whiplash. The transition from those deep midnight conversations where you feel entirely seen to getting a flat one-word answer 48 hours later.
It's the worst.
It's completely disorienting. It makes you want to rewind every single interaction,
Mm,
overanalyze every text, and find the exact microscopic moment where you supposedly ruined everything.
right, which is exactly our mission today.
Yeah.
Welcome to this deep dive, where we are going to decrypt that exact terrifying silence.
Yes, we're getting into it.
We are looking at the surprising psychology behind why men pull back just when things seem to be going flawlessly. And our grounding source for this exploration is this fascinating viral article from relationship and dating blogger Sofia Reed.
Over at sophiareed.com,
Yeah, it's called Why Men Pull Away When Falling for You.
which is such a brilliant, nuanced piece of writing. I know we are both massive fans of her work, and her entire Chosen Not Chasing Pinterest board is essentially a masterclass in modern relationship dynamics.
Oh, absolutely. A total
But
masterclass.
this specific article really gets to the core of an incredibly painful dynamic.
I totally agree. I'm a huge fan of her broader philosophy, but when I read the mechanics she lays out in this specific piece, my jaw actually dropped. So, okay, let's unpack
Let's
this.
do it.
Because the core thesis here completely flips the script on that heavy silence. We are so conditioned to assume that distance equals a loss of interest.
Right. That's the default assumption.
But the argument here is that the distance isn't about him losing interest in you at all. It is actually about him losing his footing, like specifically because he likes you so much.
That is the pivotal reframe right there.
Yeah.
And it requires looking at the mechanics of emotional control. Because when the dynamic shifts from me to us, it triggers a massive emotional alarm system in a man's brain.
An alarm system.
Yeah, often men are socialized to navigate life with a very specific, tight grip on their baseline reality. They like to know exactly where they stand, what they're responsible for, and how to fix problems.
Mm.
Their sense of safety is tied to their autonomy.
Right. They have their routine, their predictable baseline. They know exactly how their week is going to go.
Precisely. And when he starts genuinely falling for you, that control just evaporates. Suddenly, his brain chemistry is completely hijacked.
He's distracted.
He is thinking about you at work.
Yeah.
He is checking his phone. He realizes his mood, his happiness, now actually depends on the actions and affections of another human being. And the reality is, he didn't emotionally pack for this journey. He stepped out thinking this was a casual, predictable stroll, and suddenly he finds himself halfway up a mountain, completely exposed to the elements.
That makes me think of this very specific physical sensation. It's like when you are walking down the stairs in the dark and your brain calculates that you've reached the bottom, but there's actually one more step.
Oh gosh, yes, that drop.
You step out into total nothingness and you get that sudden, terrifying drop in your stomach, your heart spikes, and you are just frantically scrambling, like flailing your arms in the dark to catch your balance.
That's it, exactly.
That's what this emotional panic sounds like internally for him.
That is a perfect physical representation of his psychological state. He is flailing in the dark. And the text captures this beautifully. There's a quote that says, "The moment he realizes you have the power to break his heart is the exact moment he might try to prove to himself that he does not need you."
Oof. Which hits incredibly hard. But I do have to step in with some pushback here. Because hearing this isn't saying, oh, he's just acting distant because he's scared of how much he likes me. A dangerously convenient excuse.
I see where you're going with this.
Right. Doesn't framing it this way just let guys entirely off the hook for flaking out or ghosting or just exhibiting generally bad behavior? It sounds a little bit like giving them a free pass.
It is a completely fair question. And the text actually validates that exact skepticism. Understanding this dynamic does not mean you accept or excuse poor behavior.
Okay, good.
But understanding the deeper context helps you stop taking his confusion as a referendum on your own worth. He isn't pulling back to be malicious. He isn't necessarily playing some calculated game.
He's just panicking.
Yeah, when he feels that stomach drop you described, his immediate biological response is to step back onto the landing. He retreats into the known, his safe, isolated baseline, just to catch his breath.
Because stepping forward is too scary.
Because stepping forward into the unknown vulnerability of love is objectively terrifying to him.
Okay, so if this internal alarm system is blaring, we need to look at what exactly those alarms are screaming at him, because this panic doesn't just exist in a vacuum, it actually takes shape.
Right.
The article outlines two major internal battles happening in his head, these twin fears. Let's look at the first one. The fear of the closing door.
Yes, the perceived loss of freedom. Even a man who actively, consciously wants a relationship can have a sudden, visceral freak out about what he assumes he has to give up to get it.
He thinks he's losing something.
To him, commitment often feels like a door closing on his individuality. He starts projecting into the future and sweating about the loss of his autonomy, like whether he'll ever be able to just grab a spontaneous drink with the guys or spend a Sunday watching sports without feeling like he has to check in or negotiate his time.
Which is such a fascinating psychological mechanism, this tension between autonomy and integration, because for a lot of people, commitment feels like an expansion. You're building an addition to your life. You are getting more space, more shared experiences. But the fear mechanism in his brain treats it like a narrowing. It initially feels like someone is walking into his carefully curated life and just locking the front door from the inside.
Exactly. It feels like a restriction of movement. And because he hasn't yet learned how to integrate you into his life without losing himself, he pulls back to test if he can still exist as a sovereign individual.
Oh.
But the second fear outlined here is arguably even more complex, and that is the worthiness gap.
Oh, this one actually broke my heart a little bit when I was reading through the piece.
It is incredibly poignant. If he views you as a high-value, incredible partner, he might suddenly look at his own life, his career trajectory, his bank account, his emotional maturity, or even his physical fitness, and feel a deep, sudden sense of inadequacy.
Like he's just not enough.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He fears he fundamentally doesn't measure up to what you deserve. Society places this enormous burden on men to be fully formed providers before they are worthy of partnership. If he feels his foundation isn't built yet, your greatness highlights his perceived flaws.
Yeah, there is this unbelievable quote in the article. He is not running from you. He's running from the version of himself who needs someone.
That's the one.
And then it follows up with, you are not too much. He just has not grown into enough yet.
It completely flips the insecurity we often bring to early dating. People spend so much time worrying that they aren't enough for a partner, right? Twisting themselves into knots to seem perfect.
Oh, constantly.
Meanwhile, he is sitting there looking at you, thinking you are too good for where he currently is in life. The pressure of maintaining your high opinion of him becomes exhausting.
Okay, but wait. My immediate instinct here, and I think a lot of listeners will heavily relate to this, is to step in. Right, like if he feels inadequate or stressed about his career, shouldn't I just roll up my sleeves and try to help him? Let me help him fix his resume. Let me organize his schedule. Let me be his biggest cheerleader and talk him through his problems so he feels secure. I'm guessing, based on the tone of this piece, that instinct actually backfires.
It absolutely backfires. The article is incredibly emphatic about this.
Yeah.
You absolutely cannot do his growing for him.
Not even a little?
Not at all. If you step in and try to manage his life to make him feel taller, you are instantly shifting the dynamic from a romantic partnership to a maternal one. You become his manager, not his lover.
Thanks.
And by trying to fix him, you inadvertently confirm his fear that he is broken and incapable of handling his own life.
Wow. So by trying to help, I'm actually proving his insecurity, right?
Precisely. You are inevitably making yourself smaller to accommodate his lack of structure. You must refuse to shrink yourself while he catches up.
So what do you do instead?
What you can do is offer genuine compliments on his character and his effort. Praise who he is intrinsically, not just his potential. But you have to let him carry his own weight and lead his own growth. Men bond through investment and overcoming challenges, so you cannot take his challenges away from him.
Okay, that makes total sense. So we know the mechanics of what he is afraid of. The perceived loss of autonomy and this deep-seated fear of not being good enough.
Right.
Because he's feeling this profound inadequacy, that pressure has to go somewhere. He can't just sit with it comfortably, so his brain unconsciously starts looking for an escape hatch, which leads to how these fears actually manifest in his behavior. This brings us to what the source calls subconscious tests.
Right. And it's crucial to establish that most men aren't doing this consciously. They aren't sitting in a dimly lit room plotting a psychological test.
Like some evil mastermind.
Exactly. It is pure, raw instinct. He pulls away because the pressure gets too high, and then his instinct waits to see what happens next. He is watching your reaction. Are you going to chase him? Are you going to flood his phone, text him 10 times in a row demanding answers and reassurance?
Because if you do that, it signals to him that you are highly anxious and that your emotional stability is entirely dependent on his validation.
Yes.
But if you stay grounded, it proves you are a high-value person who isn't easily shaken by a fluctuation in the weather. It reminds me of an engineer building a bridge.
Oh, I like this.
Before they trust that bridge enough to drive a massive, heavy truck across it, they aggressively poke and prod at the structural supports. They apply intense stress just to see if the structure is sound. His pulling away is him poking the bridge.
That is a brilliant way to visualize the mechanism. He needs to know the foundation won't crumble the moment his energy shifts. He wants to know you have your own center of gravity. But there's another layer to this testing phase, which involves the ghosts of his past.
Right, his old relationship wounds. It's explained that sometimes the really good feelings of a brand new, healthy relationship act as a paradox trigger.
Yeah, it's counterintuitive.
If his last serious relationship blew up right when things got intimate, his brain literally rewires to link getting close with imminent pain. So when things get good with you, he braces for impact.
What's fascinating here is how the human brain will always prioritize survival over happiness. By creating distance, he thinks he's creating a safety buffer. He is outrunning ghosts that have absolutely nothing to do with you or anything you've done.
And you can't fix that for him.
No, you cannot fight those ghosts for him. Only time, consistency, and his own internal healing can do that.
Which, to be totally honest, feels incredibly unfair.
It does.
Why should his ghosts from past relationships get to haunt our new relationship? Why should the listener have to tiptoe around his old baggage just because some other person hurt him years ago?
It feels unfair because you are being asked to navigate a minefield you didn't plant. But the perspective offered here is vital. It is not about tiptoeing. It's not about walking on eggshells to appease his trauma.
Then what is it about?
It is about maintaining a peaceful, low-conflict baseline for yourself. It's about recognizing that his temporary silence is a reflection of his internal weather, not a personal attack on your character. You aren't catering to his ghosts. You're simply refusing to let his ghosts disrupt your peace. You stay steady.
Okay, I really love that distinction. Not tiptoeing, just protecting your own peace, which perfectly forces the question of what to do next, transitioning us into the ultimate action plan. We know why the alarm is sounding, we know the bridge is being tested, so what exactly is the listener supposed to do with herself while he is off battling these internal fears?
The core strategy prescribed here can be summed up in 2 words.
Lean back.
Lean back. When he pulls away, human nature dictates that your instinct is to lean in, to close the gap, to fix the silence. The guidance is that you must do the exact opposite. You stay in your power. You go live your life like the main character of your own story.
Yes. There's a great personal anecdote shared about this. The author was dating a guy. They went on their first weekend trip together. Everything was absolutely amazing, high romance. And then he suddenly stopped calling for 3 days right after they got back.
Classic.
Just complete silence. She was initially devastated. But that exact experience led her to discover the work of relationship expert James Bauer.
Yes, Bauer's book, His Secret Obsession. The article advocates strongly for integrating this work, specifically the concept of activating a man's hero instinct. And this ties directly back into the worthiness gap we discussed earlier.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, because the article drops this term hero instinct, but what is the actual mechanism there? The idea is that when a man feels truly connected and feels like he can be your hero, he stops running. But how does leaning back actually trigger that?
It works by creating a vacuum. If you lean in, manage the relationship, initiate all the texts, and plan all the dates, you're taking up all the space. There is no room for him to step up and provide value.
So he just sits back.
Right. The hero instinct isn't about him needing to literally rescue you from a burning building. It's about his deep psychological need to feel that his presence adds tangible, irreplaceable value to your life.
Okay.
When you lean back and focus on your own full life, you create an empty space. You give him the opportunity to step into that space, to pursue you, to earn your attention. He needs to feel he is earning his place beside you.
She writes, stop trying to be chosen. Start being the woman worth choosing. There is a profound difference.
It's a phenomenal quote because it shifts the entire locus of control back to you. You let him feel your absence naturally. You do not overcompensate for his distance by filling his phone with anxious messages.
But I have to throw another piece of pushback your way.
Bring it on.
I can hear people saying, doesn't leaning back and deliberately matching his distant energy just feel like we're playing toxic dating games? How is intentionally ignoring him any better than the silent treatment he's giving me?
It's a very common concern, but the text offers a profound counter to this. Leaning back is not a spiteful strategy. You aren't doing it to punish him, to teach him a lesson, or to win a game of chicken.
It's not a manipulation tactic.
No, it is a fundamental act of self-respect. Remember how we talked about his fear of losing his autonomy? By leaning back, you are giving him the autonomy to actually choose you. You are moving the pressure. If you fill all the space with your anxiety, he feels cornered into the relationship. If you step back into your own life, he gets the necessary quiet to realize how much he actually misses your presence.
So if you successfully lean back, you don't send the 10 anxious texts, and you just live your best, unbothered life, we eventually hit the climax of this whole dynamic, the return.
Yes, the return.
What happens when the pressure drops and he inevitably resurfaces from his little panic cave? So what does this all mean for the actual reality of the relationship going forward?
This is where a very clear reality check is provided. When he comes back, your job is to observe.
Yeah.
If he returns more present, more affectionate, and more committed to moving forward, that is a massive milestone.
That's the ideal scenario.
It means he successfully navigated his own terrifying emotions, processed his fear, and actively chose you over his isolation.
But if he stays distant, or if he just keeps pulling away over and over again, disappearing for a week, coming back for a day, disappearing again without ever addressing the pattern, the advice is that you have your answer without having to beg for it, because you deserve a partner who falls and stays fallen.
Exactly right. When he returns, you don't pretend nothing happened, but you also don't attack him the second he says hello. You wait until the emotional temperature is stable, you have a calm, objective conversation, and you set clear boundaries about the consistency and communication you need to feel secure moving forward.
It makes me think of a major smartphone software update.
Oh, I'm intrigued.
When you are downloading a massive new operating system, which is like taking a relationship from casual dating to a much deeper, vulnerable level of commitment, the device literally has to power down. The screen goes black. It has to restart to install the new depth.
That's a great mechanical analogy.
But here's the catch. If the phone tries to restart but keeps crashing in a continuous boot loop every single time, eventually you have to admit that the hardware just cannot support the new software. So in real life, how do we know the difference between a necessary software update, like a momentary growth period, and a guy whose emotional hardware is just fundamentally unequipped, who's basically going to keep crashing and wasting our time?
The expert answer, drawing straight from the core metric in the article, is looking for consistent growth versus a stagnant pattern.
Growth versus stagnation.
Yeah, a good partner might need that initial restart. He might panic once, but he learns from it. His hardware adapts, and he learns to communicate his fears better the next time, instead of just disappearing. A bad partner, or simply one whose emotional hardware is completely unready for the update, runs from those fears indefinitely.
He stays in the boot loop.
He stays in the boot loop. He pulls away every time things get close. And the hard truth is, you cannot reach into his brain and upgrade his motherboard for him.
Wow. That really distills the whole thing perfectly. You can't code his hardware for him. It brings us right to the ultimate takeaways from this entire guide. The woman who stays steady while a man works through his fear is the woman he never forgets.
Absolutely.
Not because she played games, not because she manipulated him, but because her worth was never a variable. She knew her value didn't drop just because he temporarily closed his eyes.
Her unshakable knowing of who she is exactly what makes a man realize he is falling for the right person. For anyone who wants to explore the nuances of this further or dive into the specific steps of how to lean back gracefully, reading the full article at sofiareed.com is highly recommended.
The ultimate comforting message the piece leaves us with is simple but profound. You are worth coming home to.
I love that.
But as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final, slightly provocative thought to mull over on your own. We've spent this entire time analyzing his need for space to figure out his feelings, unpacking his fears, and figuring out why he's stumbling in the dark.
Right.
But what if his pulling away is actually the universe giving you the exact space you need? A moment to pause, stand at the top of the stairs, look at the relationship objectively without the haze of romance, and ask yourself, Do I actually even want him when he comes back?